I live inside a giant planet floating in the end dimension. This project started long ago when I destroyed every block of obsidian and endstone from the end. Then I built this cartoon railroad to orbit the end portal, and finally, I built Planet Delta and moved my items into the new storage room. However, that storage room barely takes up any space inside the planet, leaving all of this empty room for more. I have a bad habit of leaving a lot of unused interior space in my builds. That will not be the case for this project. The interior I have planned will use this space to its fullest extent. Let's start with a brief tour of the top floor. This room serves as general item storage, and 95% of my items are going to be stored here. By the way, I used a data pack to make these invisible item frames available. I built this room first because I wanted to move my items to the end as soon as possible, so I could stop running back and forth to the overworld every time I needed something. But logistically, it makes the most sense to build the floors from the bottom up. That will be the easiest for me and look the best on the time-lapse. Since the entrance is at the very top of the planet, I want the floors to go from most important at the top to least important at the bottom. That way I can minimize the amount of time I spend traveling throughout the base. Of the 4 floors, I deemed the furnace room to be the least important, so it gets the bottom slot. Most of this base, and the entire end project in general, is going to be brightly colored, so I thought it'd be fun to go darker with the furnace room, starting with these fire pits. I sprinkled some campfires throughout, particularly under the vent in the very center. The smoke, by the way, is a lot less thick in-game. The time-lapse, for whatever reason, makes it look very intrusive. I built the bones of the wall out of polished deep slate bricks. We'll fill in the gaps later on. Up next is the functional part of this floor. I want to build 4 separate furnace rooms, 1 for smokers, 1 for blast furnaces, and 2 for regular furnaces. I landed on a very simple furnace array design. It's barely automated, so you still have to put in your own fuel and divvy up the items to some extent, but it allows me to throw in a bunch of different items to be smelted in the background while I work on other things. A massive furnace array is something that I've wanted to build in this world for a while now. When I inevitably do, I want to make it its own project with its own full decor. By making my base's furnace room so manual, I protect the existence of that future project. Also, even if I do build a super nice smelter, there will always be times when I need to smelt just a few stacks of items, so this room won't lose its value either. Also, you'll see me using a block that looks like white cobblestone. That's actually diorite. It's a texture I made for my own custom texture pack. It's accompanied by a white stone brick for the polished diorite texture. I did the same thing to granite, but made it a darker cobblestone. There are a few other changes, though much more minor, throughout this build. I'll let you know when they pop up. I forgot to record the rest of the build process for this floor, so I'll do a little tour to show you what you missed. There are 4 cages hanging over the fire pits that will eventually be used to hold rare mobs like the brown mushroom, but that's a project for another time. On each wall, I built a 2D version of the different type of furnaces. There's a note block in front of each that, when interacted with, opens a small piston door, leading you to the furnace room. The furnace pixel art indicates what kind of furnaces you can find inside that room. Up next is the room containing the portal back to the overworld. Now, the functional part of this room, the end portal, is pretty small, but being in the center of the planet means it gets to have the biggest room. Seeing as 99% of this room is purely decoration, I wanted it to be really flashy while also feeling representative of the overworld in some way. These requirements gave me an opportunity to build something I've wanted to build for a while. A long time ago, I saw what's referred to as the 47th floor in a television show called Sword Art Online. It was this beautiful flower-filled court with brick paths separating these flower beds trimmed in white stones. And the flowers had these gorgeous white arches looming behind them with a fountain in the very center. It seemed like the kind of image that would translate beautifully into Minecraft, and I saw this room as the perfect opportunity to do so. For both aesthetic and pragmatic reasons, I decided to add a manual sugarcane farm into this room as well. I alternated between moss blocks and waterlogged azalea leaves. That way I can harvest the sugarcane on a completely flat surface. I got the flowering azalea from working on the creeper garden project. That build required 14 shulkers of regular azalea leaves, leaving me with a stockpile of the flowering ones. Mainly, I think fully grown sugarcane will be a nice backdrop once the room is finished, but on top of that, this gives me a backup supply of sugarcane if I ever need it. I have a pretty big automatic sugarcane farm that I built as part of the Mario project, but that's in the overworld. If I ever find myself out of rockets, it's nice to have this little stockpile of sugarcane here to craft more. In case you haven't noticed, my base is completely inaccessible without them, and I'd prefer not to get caught slipping. Let's talk about some of the custom textures that you're seeing. I changed the brick texture to have some variation in how light or dark each brick is. It was a super small change, but a huge improvement in my opinion. I also redid most of the flowers in Minecraft. Most importantly, I made each flower look like a bundle of 5. This really fills in the flower beds and makes flowers just generally more usable, at least for my purposes. For the most part, I stayed faithful to the default designs, but I did make a few big changes. Mainly, I turned blue orchids into a light blue tulip, and I made azure bluettes into a pink and white puffy flower. Once the flowers were planted, the room really started to come together. The next big step is to tackle the white arches and to get a roof figured out. After getting the first set of arches in, I thought it might look cool to have a balcony and then another set of arches on top of that, so I added those as well. Now, for the star of the show, the Overworld portal. I'm going to conceal all of the bedrock by putting a fountain over top it. However, I'm going to leave the portal blocks exposed, allowing me to jump into the water and get immediately teleported to the overworld. The fountain turned out a little more futuristic than I was going for, but I like it nonetheless. Now onto the fourth and final floor. This room is going to be by far the most functional. Its purpose is to store dyeable items, automatically produce wool, and automatically sort that wool into chests. Since the purposes of this room all revolve around colors, I wanted the decoration to be equally bright. Each wall of this room is going to have a different purpose, but right now, I'm just getting the decorative parts out of the way. Once the shell of the room has been built, I will work on each wall individually. First up is the wall of sea lanterns. Right now this wall looks silly, but once I cover the lanterns with shulker boxes, it will really pop. The purpose of this wall is to store my dyed and dyeable items. The normal chests in the very center store items that can be dyed, like plain glass, sand, gravel, and plain terracotta. The clumps of shulker boxes will each store a different type of dyed item. The color of each shulker box indicates the color of the items that can be found inside. And of course, I added barrels below each section for overflow storage, in the very likely event that I end up with more than one shulker box of one of these items. Okay, Now the two walls on the side are the sheep farm part of this room. I already have a sheep farm as part of the Under Lava Lab project, but it's just not efficient enough, and with the upcoming planet builds, I'm gonna need a lot of wool. I figured I had two options. I could build a big, very efficient sheep farm and AFK for a while, or I could build a small sheep farm and place it somewhere I frequently visit so it passively produces wool. I decided on option 2, and what better place to put the farm than in my storage room. Normally, I would be concerned about the lag that this would add to the base, but out here in the void, I've got frames to spare. The lower minecart track collects the wool that's been harvested, and the upper track restocks the shears. Behind the big wall of chests, I added redstone item filters. This will be the automatic wool storage section of the room. Right above the upper minecart track, I added a chest silo. The plan is to fill this with a ridiculous number of shears for the farm to pull from. I don't really want to restock this again for a while, so I really loaded it up. Luckily, sheep farms come with a built-in alert system to let you know when the shears are gone. Once you start seeing sheep covered in wool, you know it's time to restock. Okay, the room is decorated, the redstone is functional, and the shears have been stocked. Now it's time to get the sheep here. I went to a stronghold that I'd never been before and started prepping. The goal is to be able to drop the sheep from sea level and have them land in water before going into the end portal. I decided to make the water 3 blocks thick and hope that would actually break their fall. I swept the local forests and found a lovely pair of sheep. They were the only sheep I could find though, so I was nervous about losing them. I dropped the first one down the hole and into the end portal, fully expecting this to be the first of multiple failed attempts, but to my surprise, the sheep made it to the end unscathed. I rushed back to the overworld to get my sheep their friend, and was able to successfully reunite them on the obsidian platform. But getting them to the end was only step 1, and there's still a whole lot of void between these sheep and that sheep farm. I made a netherrack pathway leading to the entrance, and lit up the path to get rid of any endermen. Before sending the first sheep over, I decided to breed them, just in case. Surprisingly, the sheep went into the base with almost no issue, and once both were in there, I was able to start breeding and dyeing them. Despite being mere blocks from the finish line, moving the sheep into their cages was maddening. The babies especially were fighting against me with every fiber of their being. But eventually, everyone was in its place, and the farm started to produce wool. And just like that, the interior is finished. At the beginning of this video, I said I wanted to use up the entirety of the interior space, and I think I did a pretty good job. There's a bit of space between floors and a little bit of room at the bottom, but for the most part, I used the space well. Before I go, there's one more thing that I wanted to share. Years ago, I uploaded my first ever Minecraft video to TikTok. It was of my survival end dimension, which I had covered in stone and grass blocks. As I added more onto that project, I kept posting more videos, but I eventually lost that Minecraft world. I took a long break and returned with a TikTok of me building the Geode Enderman farm and a brand new survival world. Since this wonderful hobby of making Minecraft videos started in the end dimension, I felt like the end transformation in this world had to be extraordinary, so I waited a long time before attempting it. I wanted to build up my skills before starting the end project so that there was a noticeable difference in quality. This planet is the start of that new dimension, the thing that every project has been building up to. I just wanted to share a bit about how this world came to be with those of you who watched this far into the video, and share some of the personal significance that this project has. Which, by the way, has only just begun. This planet is the first, not the one and only. In fact, at the time I'm recording this, the next planet's exterior is finished, and I've already started working on that YouTube video. If you want to see what comes next, keep an eye out for a video about Planet Bumble.